So, Reverend Ozzie, I want to back up a little bit to your experience at Olivet. Olivet is your church home. It's the church that you married into. It's the place where you received your calling. And now you have this call. Pastor Wright has offered you the opportunity to move to Chicago. And not only do you have to leave your home, the life that you've built in Memphis, business, job, but now you have to leave your home church. How was that?
That was probably one of the most gut-wrenching experiences that I could ever go through in my life, because one, Reverend Whalum did not want Barbara to go. He didn't want to lose Barbara because Barbara had been playing for that church since she was 14. And so she had 7 choirs. Seven choirs. I directed the handbell choir and was a staff musician. So I played drums at Olivet all those years I was there. And
are y'all keeping track of the instrument count?
Played drums. and I was playing bass in my group and playing drums. And so it was hard because everybody you've known, everybody you've had anything to do, and so I thought I was losing my mind. And I was just really, but thank God for my good friend, Reverend Alan Ragland, and his wife, Barbara. Both of the Barbers worked at Union Planters Bank together and Federal Express together and all of that. And then they moved up here 2 years after we did when he passed the Third Baptist. But anyway, Alan called me one day. He said, talk to me. He said, meet me at Shoney's. And Shoney's was on Elvis Presley Boulevard. We sat there. He said, I know what's on your mind. He said, talk to me. Tell me how you feel. I said, Alan, I've never been as confused and scared in my life. And he just listened as I talked about leaving, not only leaving Olivet, but leaving my mama, my daddy, Barbara leaving her parents and all that. My father didn't want his grandchildren in Chicago. He said, look, we'll raise these children down here. Y'all leave them here. Y'all going up there. And our dad, it's a package deal, so can't get up there. But that was very difficult to leave the familiar of Memphis. That's all I knew. And then you can't, you're hearing people expressing their fears. And then when you make decisions like that are abrupt, that move you from Egypt to Canaan, something happens to people because sometimes it reminds them perhaps of what they haven't done, but certainly you scare them. I'll never forget my father-in-law. My late father-in-law took Barbara to dinner unbeknownst to me. He said, boy, I want you to know, because one thing about him, whatever came out. He said, boy, I want you to know I took your wife to dinner the other night and asked her, why are you following him up there? Ain't nobody heard him preach. And so I said, you did? He said, but you know what she told me? I said, what did she tell you? She said, Daddy, I'm going with my friend. He's my husband and my friend. He started crying while he was telling me, and Mr. Westbrook would cry in a minute. He said, I left it alone. And eventually Barbara moved both of her parents up here. But that was tough. And there was some anger with some people, and some people wished us well. Okay. But it was a tearjerker. It was gut-wrenching, leaving everything I know to go to Chicago and to hear everybody's fears. And somebody said, you going there with all that crime? And I was saying, well, Memphis has 3 shifts of police down here too. There's fewer people to do it. I said, well, I don't see them take off. But you can't listen to other folks' fears. So we put our house on the market. A house we had just moved into, which was our dream home. About 3 blocks west of Graceland, an exclusive neighborhood called Bluebird Estates. We moved there. We loved that house. And to put a sign in the yard after having been there on it for a year, that was hard. So I had to finally just rise above that, and we came up here August. So that was April when I accepted the call. Right. August of 1990, we were living in Chicago. And Dr. Wright, Trinity sent me to seminary. I was able to go to McCormick full-time, graduated in 3 years. He brought me on staff full-time as an associate pastor of music, of the music department. I stayed there 6 years under him, and then this call came to do Covenant. And so there's a lot of stuff I've left out in between, but Barbara was very supportive all the way, because she gave her notice on her job.
Wow.
And I got cold feet. I said, baby, let's just stay in Memphis. She said, I'll see you in Chicago. And I went on and I said, well, I'll go.
Yeah.
We were going anyway because we sold the house. I don't know where I was going to stay unless I was going to move in with my parents and be wifeless because she had made up her mind. The kids were, and I still remember the day we drove up here in August. My sister Terry, baby sister Terry, I have a sister named Daryl who lives here, who had moved up here a year before to be on the radio with Richie Steele. She was on the morning drive. Daryl King. And so I pulled off of Dan Ryan, never forget, got off, exited 71st Street. And my kids were asleep, but they woke up because they felt the car slowing down. And they woke up and I saw them back there nudging each other. Is this where we gonna live? They were looking around. They had never seen anything like Chicago before. You know, you got to get the picture. Right. Going down 71st Street, after having lived in Memphis and the suburbs and all of that, it was shock to them. And then Trey has always been, Ozzie III has always been the one that, Daddy, is this where we're gonna live? I said, yes, son. And so moved, found a place. We were at 6912 South Shore in a 3-flat on 3rd floor. And the moving van was already there, got all that stuff. And I just remember unpacking all those boxes and wondering, what in the world have I got myself into?
Right. But you stayed steady on the path of where God was leading you. You know, you talked about how, pastors began to show up in the music store that you all had. So that was a part of you guys moving. You had to shut the music store down. You had to move out of the house. But yet you had a wife who encouraged you.
Encouraged me every step of the way.
To stay on the path.
Step of the way. I know she prayed for me, sang. She prayed, and all of that. She was behind me, and Trinity gave her a job playing for Imani Yawatume, the organist, and she played for them, and we did that, and I supervised the musicians and that kind of thing, and as well as a liaison with 15 ministries at Trinity. I was on skates at Trinity, but I learned a lot. Got a chance to listen to Jeremiah Wright, Dr. Jeremiah Wright, every Sunday, and to play my horn over in the corner, and that was all I wanted.
Yeah. It's certainly difficult to underestimate the impact of having a strong partner in ministry. And certainly from what I've heard about Barbara, our conversations about her, she was just that for you. She guided you in those moments of doubt, which we all have, because I resonate with that so much, because my wife does the same thing for me. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little later in the conversation. But I so appreciate you sharing that, because oftentimes the pastor's spouse kind of gets left out of the equation of the story and how important they are in the ministerial journey. But you can't underestimate the importance of especially having a strong person to help guide you and support you and to pray for you, and that's so important.
She did all of that at the same time, and I thought about the sacrifice she made. She gave up her job to come up here. Yeah. And here again, it had to have been God. When we got ready to leave, and our house sold in 6 weeks in a market that had been flat, sold in 6 weeks, Federal Express, which she worked for, said, we have a position for you in Chicago. So it was a done deal. They were going to pay for the move and everything. The day the movers had come to my house and moved all our stuff out of it and taken off, we got a phone call. It's FedEx telling Barbara that the position that they had for her has been indefinitely frozen. I said, oh my God. Which meant she had to commute back and forth to Memphis the whole month of September. I would pick her up on Monday nights, on Friday nights. She'd fly into the Metroplex out of O'Hare, and she would stay until Monday, and I'd take her back out there on Monday nights. She'd fly back and work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that went on for all month. But her job ended October the 12th. 1990. She was to have the viable income. So all of a sudden now, we know this her job, because she always made the viable income, because a school teacher in Memphis, trust me, I had a master's degree when I left there. And not that money is everything, but she never threw that in my face that she made 3 times much more money than I did, because she was a banker by profession. And so, so that knocked the air out of my soul because I had quit teaching. I still had one IRA left. Yeah, and I drew that down to pay for the move. So when we came up here, we had $2,400 to our name.
My God.
And her job ended October the 12th. Somebody advised that she go down to Johnson Publishing for an interview. She went down to Johnson Publishing. Because I had to be in class that night, Pilgrimage and Faithfulness at McCormick. So I swung by after her interview, and when she was coming out the door, I've seen that look on her face once before that said, something just happened. God had just happened. She got in the car. She said, honey, he created a job for me. The late John Johnson, Ebony Jett, created a job. She was vice president of corporate planning. Boom, just like that. Everything that we lost, God put right back. And I thank God for Mr. Johnson. She worked there 9 years before getting back to her first love, which was banking at Northern Trust. But she always landed on her feet because she just trusted in God. I saw that, and it just messed with me how her faith was unshakable. And deep was the hunger to move further, and I didn't know it would turn. Because if you had told me I'd be in ministry, I would have had some colorful words to say to you. Especially when I was in college. But the irony, when I was in college, my nickname in the dorm was Preacher.
Yeah.
I don't know how. Wasn't that I was doing anything that was preacherly in the dorm? You know, I wasn't a heathen, but I was close.
Yeah.
But my nickname was Preacher. And I asked my friend who coined the name, lives in Schaumburg, Artie Smith. I said, man, what? He said, you were as pure as the driven snow. He said, you tried to run with us. He said, but you just were not authentic. And I tried to hang with him, you know, but.
Well, that's amazing because sometimes people can see the call or the gift in you before you can see it.
I didn't see it. I didn't see it, but I would go to chapel, and when I played as a fraternity, we had to go to the church in the village of Langston because the pastor was in Omega. So we had to go, and while we were doing a whole players period, and I would go, I admitted that I would be sitting up there not knowing what was going on. Just like I was when I was in East Trick, I didn't know what was going on. Not that nothing was going on, but I would see my grandfather cry. I would see my grandmother cry. I would see people get emotional. I would hear that text of Isaiah. In the year when King Uzziah died, folks started shouting for the star. I said, what? It was something they knew about. I saw also the Lord high and lifted up, and his raiment filled the temple. Now I know what that means.
Right.
Because God fills up everything.
That's right.
So once I got in seminary and got busy, because I started seminary that October in McCormick, and a seminary is an acquired taste. But I wanted to go, but I didn't go to any orientation. I went to seminary cold turkey. And when I got there, I backed into one of the most tremendous experiences I ever backed into my life. I was asking myself every day, where has this place been all my life? Because the courses you were taking, pastoral care, pastoral counseling, biblical studies, and all kinds of different coursework, Greek, and then you going back and forth with your classmates, entering into dialogue and all of the stuff, and then doing clinical pastoral education things and internships at churches and all of that kind of stuff, and then taking preaching and having to preach. And I remember after I'd taken intro to preaching, which was a prerequisite at Trinity, you weren't going to preach there unless you took the course, some course in seminary. So Pastor Wright said, I'm going out of town. He said, you're going to have to preach for me this Sunday. I said, you want me to preach to all them people? He said, Ozzie, it's the Christ, not the crowd. Yeah. I said, not the crowd. Don't worry about the crowd. It's the Christ. And I heard what he said, but that didn't register with me at the time because I'm looking at all these people at Trinity. Trinity, at that point, we were still at 532 West 95th Street. I had never seen that many people at church on a Sunday. Olivet had about 1,400 members, but Trinity was like this every Sunday. People would come to Trinity to stand up in the same place. One guy had a stand-up place every Sunday. On the end of the first pew, designated that he would get there in time to stand up. And so it was always like that. I said, wow. And they were coming and to hear Dr. Wright preach, I said, I see why. It was something. And so all of that, he was pouring into me. And Reverend Whalum was a real different kind of a preacher too. because he was unorthodox. He would bunk tradition every chance he got. So he was a different kind of preacher, and really gave me permission to look at ministry, because he instituted casual Sunday.
Okay.
At Olivet. You never heard that in Memphis. Every Sunday at church, you got time, but casual Sunday, fourth Sunday, every Sunday, fourth Sunday, casual Sunday. And he was just one of those, he was different. There was no pretense about him.
Okay.
He was real. What you saw was what you got, and if he said something, that's what he meant. That's just how he was. He was a take no prisoners, though. He was authoritarian. But he knew he had people skills. And whatever, he wouldn't ask you to do anything he wouldn't do. He'd mop the floors, he'd serve food. We go to church picnics and all those things. And I saw a church do something I'd never seen. We started fellowshipping with Trinity. And Trinity, Olivet would send our buses up to bring Trinity to Memphis. And I saw, and then when I met Dr. Jeremiah Wright, another free preacher.
Yeah.
Free,
yes, indeed.
Preach, saying. I said, "Oh, did he just say what I just heard him say?" And so, and he and Reverend, I believe that's why he and Reverend Whalum hit it off. And so I got a chance to see, because prior to that, ministers to me were paragons of virtue. They always wore black suits, ties, and they spoke eloquently, and they rolled their R's out of them. I said, "Oh God, I can't be like that. I'm not perfect." Right. But Reverend Whalum turned me aside. I always tell him, I said, "You planted a seed that Dr. Jeremiah Wright watered." And that's how I got into ministry. So Dr. Proctor later put it in perspective for me. He said, "Boy, when you give your life to God, you will back into more things than you will go on purpose." He said, "Serendipity is the way you go." Yeah. And he said, "You'll never fill out another job application." And he told the truth.
Wow. Well, speaking of serendipity, and let me say also that it's evident the influence that Reverend Whalum and Pastor Wright have had on you. I think it's often said of you that you're not so much of a preacher that you're not human.
And that was the thing. I didn't want to be putting on pretense and getting what we used to say in seminary, putting on a God voice. Yeah. Got to be me. This is what God did with me.
That's right.
And God can do the same thing with you. And so, and so I thank God for Reverend Kenneth Whalum, because he planted the seed. Reverend Whalum used to always say, "Boy, it's hard enough being who you is, much less who you ain't."
My. Yeah, and that's been a real gift of your ministry. And you mentioned Dr. Samuel DeWitt Proctor, who you had the amazing privilege of being under his tutelage through your D-Men program, which is another amazing part of your ministerial journey. And how he talked about this notion of serendipity, backing into more things than you plan to walk into. So let's talk about some of the serendipitous moments of your ministry, particularly now that you're at Trinity. You've left Memphis, you're at Trinity, you've gone through seminary, you are the associate pastor of music. Then comes Easter 1995.
Easter 1995, 3 a.m. in the morning, I get a call from First Lady Rhema Wright, Pastor Wright's wife. She said, "Reverend Ozzie?" I said, Yes, Rhema. I said, "Everything okay?" She said, "Yeah, Rev lost his voice, so you got to do the 6 and the 8 o'clock service." I said, "What? Easter Sunday? When they'd be looking for him?" Easter Sunday, and I lie not. When I got up at 6 a.m. service to preach, I said, "I feel like those angels in the empty tomb now." I said, "Who y'all looking for ain't here." I said, "I might be Reverend wrong for a lot of y'all this morning, because I ain't Reverend right." Man, I did that for both services, but I did it. Reverend Wonder did the 10 and the 12. Right. Trinity used to have 5 services on Easter, and so that happened. So I said, "Wow, that's interesting." First Easter he had never preached at Trinity since 1972. Wow. He preached at Trinity, so I just put that behind me and said, "Wow, that was a heck of an experience." Then Paul Sadler calls me. Art Wademan calls me. "Man, you need to put your name in the hat." I put my name in the hat for what? They got a new church started in South Holland, Illinois. I said, "Where's that?" They said, "In South Suburbs, 159th. I said, "I don't want to go to no church that ain't got no members. I ain't starting no church." I said, "I want to go to a church that got members," because I'd already been interviewed by a church in Florissant, Missouri, church in Gary, 2 churches, but neither one of them turned out. Well, the Florissant just wasn't going to work. I was going to have to commute for 2 years everywhere. That wasn't even worth my health.
Right.
That was not going to be well for me. So I reluctantly put my name in the hat. My interview was October of 1995 at St. Paul Community Church in Homewood, Illinois. I lived in Flossmoor, so right. So I went to the interview. They told me I was going to have to preach, and I was going to have to interview. So I preached to the search committee. So after I preached, then they said, well, listen, we're going to have a chat, and I'd ask you a few questions. Well, how will you start this church? I said, I don't know. I've never started no church before. They don't teach you that in seminary.
Right. They don't.
Well, do you have any? I said, no, I've never started a church before. I said, I've built band programs, but I've never started a church. I've never pastored a church. I've watched pastors. I've been around pastors. I said, but I don't know how to start a church. I said, and when I left, I said, that got them. They ain't gonna call me now. I was happy. I get a call December 19th, the Reverend Luther Holland, used to be the pastor of Congregational Church of Park Manor. He said, congratulations, Pastor. I said, congratulations for what? He said, you going to be the founding pastor of the new church start in South Holland. I said, what? So I said, oh, okay. I said, well, thank you, and he said, congratulations. I said, thank you. I hung up. I immediately called Pastor Wright because I knew he was going to rescue me. I said, Pastor Wright, I just got a call. He said, what's the matter? I said, they want me to start a church that ain't got no members. He said, congratulations. When you want your last day to be at Trinity? I said, oh, God, no, he didn't just push me out. I was speechless. I said, boom, that's another backing me into something. Because the church was going to be named, they had done a feasibility study and everything. Kente United Church of Christ. Prior to that, it had been Thornridge United Church of Christ. Started in 1959, built that building in 62, had as many as 125 members, 119, 125 members, and they they had their final service Easter Sunday, 1995. Wow. While I was preaching over at Trinity. I didn't know this until I got called to the church. I researched the history. So I said, wow, they were shutting down while I was over there preaching with fear and trembling. Because one person joined that Sunday when I was preaching at Trinity. And so there were 3 pastors on there, John Noah, Rick Magnos, and Luther Holland. And they would give me all kinds of suggestions about how I should start because the management team is your board of directors. Right. And so you need to put out you need to do this. You need to have a service at 2 o'clock every Sunday. I said, no, I'm going to start at 11 o'clock. Start at 11 o'clock if we're going to have a service. They said, when you want to start? I said, Easter Sunday. I said, they ended at Easter Sunday? I said that's kind of incomplete. I said, that runs against the theology I know. I said, they had a final service on Easter. Let us have our inaugural service on Easter. Yeah. So they backed up and said, well, okay. That service was packed on that Sunday. Because, we had announced it and done our homework, and we had 12 choir members. Some people from Trinity came over to help us, and some deacons came over to help us because that was the first Sunday. April 7th, 1996 was the first Sunday. So Easter Sunday, first Sunday. So you needed communion. So you started in the church. I ain't having a deacon. So the deacons came over from Trinity. We had 12 members in the choir. And I packed, that church would hold comfortably 280 people. Okay. Because it had folding chairs. Yeah. It was packed to the gills. Yeah. And 27 people marked the aisle that Sunday on the sermon I preached entitled, I remember the text. I don't remember the text, I remember the title, When Jesus Shows Up. And that has been my life story from that point on. Jesus had to show up because I didn't know what I was doing. I was up there, I preached my best, and the 27 people walked the aisle. And Paul Sadler, who's the pastor of Mount Zion Congregational Church in Cleveland, Ohio, who was then the secretary for African American Church Development for the UCC, he said, now, Reverend Ozzie, don't panic. He said, because this is not going to look like this next Sunday. He wasn't lying. There were 27 people there looking at me to preach that next Sunday. It wasn't, the sanctuary wasn't packed. It was just those 27 people and the little 12-member choir. And Dr. Philip Wells was playing piano. And we had a drummer, Michael Preston, and I forgot who was playing bass. Somebody was playing bass. And we were there. And God said, you show up, I'll show up. And so this next Sunday, I preached another sermon I had. I said, yeah, this will work too. I had written, what I was in seminary. I preached that one then, but after that I said, wow, now what am I going to preach next Sunday? Because I got to do this every Sunday. So the lectionary became my friend.
Okay.
'Cause they taught that at McCormick, because McCormick is Presbyterian. I said, ain't nobody going to tell me how to preach. I preach whatever I want to preach, but I'd never pastored a church before.
Right.
So, man, I looked, and the lectionary became my friend. From that point on, I preached lectionary, so I always had a text. And I did my best with it to preach, and people started joining. Next thing I know, we had almost 200 members in a year's time. So in 1997, we went out to Winnetka.
Okay.
No, Wilmette.
Okay.
Congregation Church out there to receive our standing
Okay.
as Covenant United Church of Christ. And by the way, Covenant was the name I suggested because Kente, I couldn't feel Kente. I said, Kente is cultural, and just because we give it a black name doesn't make it black.
Right.
And so Covenant was the name. I said, that's theological. That's about the relationship. And so that's how we went. But the 27 people came 200 people. Then after that, then it continued to grow. God was showing me something. Then we had to go to 2 services, 7:30 and 11, with Sunday school in between.
The church is now established, Easter 1996. Within a very short amount of time, it's growing, and it's beginning to grow rapidly, almost to the point where you're outgrowing the building that you're in. And now your wife, Barbara, has assumed the role of First Lady. Tell us a little bit about her role in the growth and formation of Covenant United Church of Christ.
Barbara was a very different kind of First Lady because she never sought to call attention to herself. She didn't even dress like a First Lady, First Lady, with the hats, and I ain't hating on nobody who wears hats. Yeah. But she didn't do that. She sat there. She got involved with the women's fellowship. She would sing in the choir. She would play the piano if she needed to, but she was always accessible and she didn't seek anybody to be serving her or this kind of thing, but she said, and she didn't allow anybody to project that image on her to make her act like that because of what they thought she was supposed to be. She was very sure of who she was and very clear about that. And after a while, when people saw that, wow, she really is like this, and she really is approachable. She really is real. She's regular. She doesn't put on airs and doesn't want anybody waiting on her. She was a worker. The Women's Fellowship was one of her pet projects, and she was there, and she just knew how to deal with people in a different kind of way. When we started dating, I said something different about her. I knew she had a relationship, but she always knew how to call people in accountability. She wouldn't let anybody just say anything to her. But she was firm, but she was always fair. Yeah. firm and fair, and could always be counted on there. And so when God granted that vision about I see it, oh boy, that's when I really had to hear it then from folks. Y'all need some more glasses. Y'all don't know what you're talking about. And so, Reverend, let's just stay here. We like this closeness and all that. 2001, construction started. 2002, we were in this sanctuary. Wow. With the money and everything, and we on Easter Sunday. Everything always happens on Easter Sunday here. We marched in here. We did the first service in the small church and did the 11 o'clock over here. We have pictures of us coming in. Okay. I think Barbara did have a hat on that Sunday because she was happy and everything. And But in terms of, I could always look down there and say, that's somebody who has my back. If nobody else in this sanctuary has my back, my wife has it. Right. And she would sit there, and it's something when you have a strong wife. I never had to worry about her taking care of herself, because she could handle herself. Yeah. 2002, the Sunday we came in church, that was Easter Sunday. September that year, Barbara got diagnosed with multiple myeloma. She had arthroscopic surgery May of that year on her right knee. She played volleyball in high school. And what looked like swelling to us, to me, just looked like swelling. We kept on going back to the doctor. She kept on sending her to physical therapy, but the swelling wouldn't go down. So finally I was serving on the governing council at Trinity Hospital. Dr. Richard Igwele, a Nigerian orthopedic surgeon. I asked him, I said, would you see my wife? And so I took her to his office, and he touched it. He said, something has organized here. That's what he said. He said, you need to see an oncologist. Sure enough, we went to Northwestern. That was a tumor that had grown through her bones. Because multiple myeloma, one of the hallmarks of it is that, hallmark is not a good word, but one of the symptoms is your bones become brittle and porous. Yeah. And so, because it wreaks havoc with your blood and bone marrow, turns your bone marrow into paste. Yeah. And there's no cure. And so that day in September in Streeterville, I'll never forget that day, because they had to immediately, when they discovered what it was, because she had a plasmacytoma, they cut that tumor off and did a biopsy on it. That's when they determined September. And so that day was a day I'll never forget, because immediately they had to give her a blood transfusion. I'm about out of my mind. We have no blood transfusion. It's HIV out here, AIDS and everything. But they said, no, the blood is okay. So I ran down there to be a designated donor. She's just going to get my blood because I'm O positive. I had to do something because I was nuts. And then she had to do a bone density scan and all that. Everything that had never happened in our lives happened that day. So my world went upside down then. And all of a sudden, cancer entered our house.
Wow. And, you know, for that matter, as a pastor, you know, balancing family and the issues that arise in all of our families is always a difficult task. Yeah. But now you've gotten this diagnosis of cancer that has come into your home, and certainly that has changed the way you look at everything. It changes the way you look at life. It changes your approach to things. How did Barbara's diagnosis change your approach to ministry?
Oh, God. The first thing it did, when it came, and we were told that there was no cure. We had worked through all kinds of problems in our life, financial, with the kids, different things, because our daughter Lauren had scarlet fever as a little child, and like Barbara's still in the hospital. We had worked through that stuff. That stuff been good, but here now, something that's not curable. Wow, there's no cure. It changed my preaching. I said, wow, I'm dealing with this unresolved issue here that's not going to be resolved. Chemotherapy visits, blood transfusions became a regular part of our life. Stem cell transplants, she had 2, where they would literally almost kill her and bring her back to life, because they would take, they would give her a dose of chemo, I forgot what it was called, and then they would give her a heavier dose in a bottle. I used to know the names of them, but they escape me right now. But it's essentially take her down to nothing, all her counts down to 0. Then they would infuse her with the cells, stem cells of her that she harvested, her own stem cells, and they would infuse it with that. So that changed my whole because I lived in the house, I lived in the chemo thing, and I come back and preach church on Sunday, and the first stem cell transplant gave her 2 years of remission. She even went to Africa with us. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, we came back, and she had relapsed back because that was at the end of the 2nd year, and so that relapsed, and then we did a second one. Yeah. That gave her a year and a half. Yeah. It changed my preaching because it was, I call it the season of declining returns. Yeah. It just, we couldn't get past that thing. She'd get better, and all the drugs would reach a point, and then they would stop working. Velcade, Revlimid, dexamethasone, Zometa, all that stuff. And now they're 4th, 5th, 6th generations. At that point, when she got it, the life expectancy was 2 to 5 years. Wow. It is now 3 to 5 years. It is now 7 to 9 years. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, because and they've improved it. They're using the same drugs. Even thalidomide was found effective against multiple myeloma, and so wow, that changed my preaching. And then around 2008, she just was not feeling good. And so some women at the church at the Women's Fellowship gave her a birthday party, September 30th, that was her birthday. And from there, when the birthday party was over, I had to take her to Northwestern. She stayed in a week, blood transfused, they got her back up, she came home. She was doing okay, then she started getting sick again. Went in and out, we went in November. Stayed for a week, blood transfused, back up. I'm still going back and forth preaching. Right before Christmas, she got sick again. And stayed for a week. Then we met Dr. Mater, and he said we might be able to get a third stem cell transplant because she harvested 4 bags of stem cells. So they were trying to do a third one, which would have given her 6 months remission. I never will forget. I said, honey, we're going to stay at the hotel right across from Northwestern, so we don't have to get up early and disturb you. We stayed at the Wyndham. It was the Wyndham then. And I never will forget that morning. We walked down the hall. We got down, went down the elevator and sat down, checking out. She said, honey, I can't walk. So I had to go over to Northwestern and got a wheelchair, put her in that wheelchair, and I pushed her across Erie. I'll never forget. She was so weak, she fell out of the chair. I picked her up out of the chair in the middle of the street, and a white lady came along. She said, sir, can I help you? And so she said, give me your bags. She went with us all the way to the 21st floor in that first pavilion. I can't think of what it is now, but got up there, and what we thought was going to be a time for a stem cell transplant, the doctor looked at me and said, as he brought her in, he said, I can tell by her eyes. I said, what do you mean? He said, that eye, one of her eyes is out of socket. He said, your eyes are like this. He said, this one is slightly to the right. He said, that means the cancer has gotten into her spine. Because see what had happened, the sickness that she got in September was called fungal pneumonia. Fungal pneumonia. And and so they had to treat it and stop treating the cancer. All the while I'm preaching and all the while I'm seeing my wife just leaving. And they checked her in January the 5th. Discharged January 12th into home hospice. She lived 10 days. She died January 22nd, and in our bed, I saw her take her last breath. I said, wow, that was a day I'll never forget. Yeah, never forget that day. And I preached her funeral. And
Yeah, and you did a great job. I was here.
preaching, and so what I learned through all of that, all those 6 years, 4 months that she suffered, was this is what you preach every Sunday before your wife got sick. It's a whole nother dimension now because you're preaching what you're going through. Right. And I tried not to bleed on the people, when I was preaching, because everybody's suffering with something. And we started meeting different people, not here, but other places that had multiple myeloma. Tom Brokaw has it now, and Colin Powell. Yeah, he just found out 2 weeks before the multiple myeloma gala this past October went to, and so there's no cure. But that got into my preaching. And the thing, I miss her, but after preaching her funeral, I should have taken off. I should have taken off a month or 2 months, or I should have taken off, and I didn't. I preached her funeral that Saturday. I preached that next day, Sunday, 2 services, and all the rest of the Sundays. By 2013, it caught up with me. Yeah. 2013, it caught up with me, and I started taking the whole month of August off. Yeah, but.
And that's hard because, of course, as a pastor, you feel responsible for caring for the people that you've been called to shepherd and to lead, and you almost feel like you're letting them down if you don't do that. But one of the things that I've learned, and I know that in the aftermath of Barbara's passing, you learned, is that you can't be any good to anybody else if you don't take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself. You giving them fumes when you ought to be giving them faith. And so it took its toll. By 2013, I had to take off. So August became my month, but it was too late. Yeah. I had worn myself out. I had, sublimation became my way. 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13. Somebody said, how'd you preach your wife's funeral? I said, God got me through that funeral because I almost lost it coming in that door. Because I came in doing the 23rd Psalm. I said, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be cracked. And God said, I got you. Because I asked Pastor Wright to do the funeral. Oh, really? He couldn't do it. He had to be somewhere else. Okay. I said, well, I'll do it. He said, are you sure? I said, well, I got to. Yeah. I know her.
But that was God, because you preached that. And one of the things that you talked about in that sermon, that eulogy, I'll never forget, and you often talk about it now in reference to something that Barbara said, in her life. And that's another amazing part, because Barbara's diagnosis shifted her into a new role, because she became an advocate and a champion for people who were suffering with multiple myeloma. And even to this day, people in the multiple myeloma community still remember her for her courage in the face of cancer. But one of the images that she lifted up, that you preach about often, is this idea of choosing to dance in the face of impending trauma. Tell us a little bit about what effect that has had on you and how you have chosen to dance in the aftermath of her passing.
She did that in October of 2008. She just got out of the hospital. And we drove down to McCormick Place. That's when they were gathering black ministers to get involved in the multiple myeloma thing. And so the MMRF people, Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, was there to tell about multiple myeloma. One, there's no cure. It disproportionately affects African Americans. The clinical trials are what they are, and if you don't have insurance, you out of gas. And so after all of that, one preacher said, well, why are we here then? If it ain't no cure, if it disproportionately affects, I mean, why are we here? We wasting our time. What are we going to advocate for this for? I didn't know Barbara was going to speak. Barbara spoke that day. She was on program to speak. She got up. She said, I hear you. She said, I could complain about my life right now. The music doesn't sound good in my life. I'm in a room where the music is playing, and I don't have any reason why I need to be on the floor. She said, but I choose to dance. She said, I could sit down and complain about it and give up about it. She said, but I choose to dance. She said, it's a choice for me, and I'm choosing to dance. It wasn't a dry eye in the place when I said, wow. She brought all of that negativity, turned it upside down, and it was over with. And then I said, wow, baby, that was awesome. I said, well, let's get ready to go home. She said, no, honey. She said, you stay here with the preachers. I have a limo to pick me up, take me home. She said, I'm sick. She rose to the occasion to speak that truth. I have never forgotten it. She faced that cancer. She looked it right in the face. I choose to dance. I could sit down and not dance, but I choose to dance. So that stuck in my craw and stuck in my spirit. And members would say, how are you so strong? I said, I'm not strong. God is strong. God is keeping me up. I said, I need to be falling out right now, kicking and crying. I said, but I cried at home. I still remember walking her body to the door on that gurney when the funeral home came to get it. And going down there to see it on family night. It's just, there's no outline to lose a spouse, especially like one like I had. But God has kept me propped up on every leaning side, during this thing. And I think it strengthened me. I know it strengthened me. When I'm preaching, I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I'm not that preacher that preached when Jesus shows up and God had to carry me all the years and grow the church and show me to grow the church. But every time I come in here, I say, wow, this is what God had in mind as I was backing into ministry. Right. Barbara birthed me into ministry in a special way as a different kind of first lady. I didn't have to worry about her acting all like this, because that was never her. Never her pretense and all that. But I learned also in the corporate world, she kept everything close to the vest anyway. Even when she got cancer, she didn't want anybody to know initially. But I said, Barbara, this is dealing with me too. I said, I got to get this out of me. And she understood. Yeah. It affected our children, our families,
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that. I know it's never easy to revisit those moments. That was certainly a difficult moment, not just of ministry, but a difficult moment of life. But one thing is clear, and that is even in her passing, her spirit and her influence on the ministry is still very much alive. And you can see evidence of that all over Covenant United Church of Christ. And so one thing we can say is that she did what she was called to do in the time that she was given.
You're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy. Yes, you are. You're worthy. You're so worthy. Yes, you are. Of all the praise.
And I thank God for you, because when we were working together at McCormick, I didn't know this was going to happen, but I watched the stuff you were doing in ministry. I said, wow, I said, he's really creative and innovative in the stuff you were doing, the barbershop stuff you were doing in your presentations and all that, always with depth. And then when you left and went to I said, wow, he's gone. But I know I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but that was, when you left, I mean, I came up there to preach for you, and then I came up there to preach again, and you came and preached for our church-wide retreat and all of that. The thing that really let me know it was time